Hey everyone, Colin Smith here, and today I'm going to show you how to set up the DJI RS3 MINI. We're going to set it up, we're going to balance it, and we're going to control the camera with the cable as well as with Bluetooth. So we're going to go through the whole process. Today I'm going to be using the Sony A7S3, but it doesn't matter what camera you're using, the setup is going to be the same. But I'm also going to show you the menus on the A7S3. If you're looking to set up the RS3 Pro and Raven Eye, I have that on a separate video. Alright, let's get started. Contents of the box are quite simple. We've got the unit, we've got the tripod, a couple of cables, and the mounting plate. So the first thing we want to do is we want to build a stable platform that we're going to set up our gimbal on. So let's open up our tripod, and then we're just going to attach it into the bottom here, and that's going to go clockwise. Make sure it's nice and tight. Don't swing on it, but just make sure it's nice and firm, because we don't want to strip those threads. Next thing we want to do is put it into position to mount the camera. So you'll notice that there's locks on here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to unlock this motor and then just move it into position. And then we're going to do the same thing here. Let's make sure it's nice and flat. So we're also going to unlock this motor. So you'll just see the little locks there. Now there's 3 axes on here. Each one has a lock. Now the battery is built in here, it's not removable, so what you're going to do is just attach the USB-C and then attach it to a power brick, and that will charge it. Alright, let's look at the mounting plate. Just a little tip, if you're going to be moving the camera between the Pro and the Mini, don't use the plate that comes with the Mini because that will not actually fit on here. This little ridge gets in the way. However, if you use the plate from the Pro, you can go backwards and forwards between the Pro and the Mini using this plate. If you're not using the Pro, then just use the one with the Mini. Now you have 2 different options in screws. We have one with a wing nut, and we have one here just with a little slot. I like to use the wing nut. So you're going to see a wider opening. Just get it in there. And don't strip the thread. It seems like you got to kind of go a couple of times on this to kind of find its groove, and then we just go through, and then it should just move freely like that. Before we mount the camera, why don't we see how this plate goes, because it'll kind of help you understand that before you slide the camera on. So if you look at the plate, you'll see there's a forward direction, and that's pointing away from the motors is the direction the camera is going to be pointing. And then if we take the plate, the part with the little bump here, the little groove, actually goes towards the front. So what you're going to be doing is you want to make sure that this is open, and then you're going to start at the front. We're going to slide it back and just kind of feel how that slides in there, and you can tighten it up. That's how the camera's going to mount. It kind of helps to pre-visualize this a little bit. So let's open it up, and then when you go to pull it out, it'll get stuck. Don't push the little button at the back, push the button at the side, and that'll slide out. All right, now we know how that's going to go. Let's mount it on the camera. So with the slot at the front, just bring it back till that just kind of sits nice and firm against the camera, and then we can tighten that up. So what it's going to do is it's going to stop the plate swiveling. It's going to keep it nice and tight on the camera. All right, next thing we want to do is we're going to mount the camera. So with the camera forward, just slide it back, and it'll lock into position. Now I'm going to slide it all the way back until it's nice and firm, and then take the locking, pull it across, and that'll lock the camera in position. So the next thing we need to do is we need to balance the camera. It's very important to balance the camera, because what it's going to do is it's going to keep it nice so it's not straining the motors so hard, they're not working so hard, they're not using as much power. And also if those motors are kind of fighting to keep it in balance, it's also going to affect the stability. Whereas a nicely balanced camera is going to give you nice stable shots, and it's going to be nice and easy on the gimbal. Before you balance this, make sure you've got all the accessories you're going to use. If you're going to be putting filters or anything like that, make sure you've got the lens on that you want. Make sure you've set it to the focal length if it has an external zoom on it. And just get everything set up on the camera how you want it before you balance. So in order to balance this, there's actually 3 motors on here. 1, 2, 3. And let me describe to you what those are. Each one has a lock. The top one, this is the tilt. So tilting goes up and down. That's the tilt motor here. We need to balance that one. Then we need to balance the roll motor. The roll is side to side. So if we unlock this, there's our roll motor here, side to side. And there's the motor on the back. Let's lock it. And then finally we have the pan motor, And if we unlock that, that's the motor down here, and panning goes side to side. The nice thing about these little locks is that when we go to balance it, we only unlock one motor at a time, and that enables us to balance it nicely and get a good accurate balance. All right, so why don't we start with this? So we can unlock tilt motor. And what we're going to do is point the camera directly up, because there's actually two areas that we want to balance on here. And so what we want to do is we want to loosen this off on the bottom, and you'll look at the side here. So we want this where the camera is nicely balanced here. So if I lift it up too high, notice the camera will roll away. If I have this too low, the camera will roll the other way. So what you need to do is just move everything in the opposite direction of where it's falling, and that'll give us a nice balance. So we're going to push this back. Now here's a little tip. When you're doing this, what you want to do is just kind of lift it a little bit and push it. And then what that does is it makes it move with less resistance, because that weight pushing down makes it hard to kind of drag. But if you lift it, you can more gently kind of move it. So we're looking for a nice balance here where it stays in position. That looks pretty good to me. Lock that in. Now we're going to go down, and then we're going to balance the second part here. So we're going to unlock that. And if you look here, this is going to be forwards and backwards. If this is too far forwards, it's going to fall forwards. Don't do that to your camera though. If we go too far back, it's going to fall back. So keep a hand underneath it. Don't just drop it. And then if we lift it and just move it forward, lift it, move it forward, you'll feel when it gets to a sweet spot. And just kind of test it, maybe a little bit more. See how it'll stay in position? That's exactly what we want. That's a good balance there. So let's lock that axis. The next thing we want to do is we want to do our roll side to side. So what I do is I like to loosen it off first before I unlock it. Now put your hand there just to stabilize it. Now unlock, and you'll feel, yeah, it's falling this way, which means we need to push the opposite way. So I'm just going to keep pushing. Too far, see how the camera falls that way? Let's go back. Once again, I'm lifting this camera to kind of help it. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's lock that. Lock it in. And then lock that axis. So, all right, let's go down to the next part. And the next part, what I want to do is I want to do the pan motor. So take it down so it's nice and horizontal with the ground. See that? We're going to loosen it off. And now, while holding it, unlock the motor. All right, and I can see that's kind of falling forwards a little bit. So what I want to do is take it back. And then when you get that balanced, lock it in. Lock that motor. Put it in position. All right, let's test it. Let's unlock all three axes. And try it. So you know when you've got a well-balanced motor is if you put it into position and the camera stays there. Now what we want to do though is we are going to now turn it on and we're going to activate the gimbal. Before you turn on the gimbal, make sure that all these three motors are unlocked. You do not want to turn on a motor while those are locked, because it can push against the motor and potentially damage it. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to just turn the on-off switch on. And you'll see the light will start up, the gimbal will start up. Okay, so right now when you turn it on, it's going to show on here that it wants an activation. So what we're going to do is download the DJI Ronin app. You'll see the QR code on the box, and I believe it's also on the gimbal. All right, we'll download the app. We're going to open it. And then you'll see a little menu. You're going to choose RS3 MINI and then click on Connect. You'll see a device list. Tap on that device list, and now it's going to ask you for a password. The password is 12345678. Now you can change it later easily enough, but this is the default password, and if you ever reset the firmware or anything like that, it's always going to default to that. So you're going to do that, and then you're going to hit connect. And then you're going to see an option to activate. You're just going to click, and then everything is going to be activated and ready to go. So the next thing you want to do now that this is set up is you want to use Autotune. Not the music Autotune, but what we want to do is it just does some fine tuning for the balancing. So go in the menu and you're going to go down till you see the little icon and it shows start calibration, and then basically we're going to turn on start calibration and it's going to vibrate. And what this is doing is it's doing fine tuning and adjusting the motors and the balance and everything. Make sure it's on an even surface, a flat surface, and you know the grinding noises are normal. And now it's ready. All right. So I can hit confirm. And now of course I can go in here and I can set a lot of different settings in here, but right now essentially, here we go, the gimbal is going to be working and it's going to be holding the camera nice and stable. Great. Now there's other things we can do. One of the things we can do is we can set the buttons on the back, and of course we can do things with the wheel at the front. So what we want to do is set the Bluetooth to work with the record button. So we want to turn on the camera. Then what we're going to do is in the menu, we're going to swipe down until you see the Bluetooth icon. And then the Bluetooth icon is going to say, make sure the Bluetooth's turned on in the camera. So we're going to go under the menu inside the camera. Now, your camera be in a different place. I'm going to tell you where it is for the Sony A7S3. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down to Network. Then we're going to go across and go down to Bluetooth. Bluetooth function, and then we're going to turn it on. That's the first step. The next step, we go down to pairing and make sure that that's turned on. Then what we're going to do is tap, confirm, and then tap, and it's going to connect. Now, if we tap the button, recording starts and stops. So working wirelessly, we can start and stop the recording. But on the Sony A7S3, you can map that button, the recording button, to do different things. I saw a video where Brandon Lee was doing it for autofocus versus manual focus, which means that as you're focusing and then something comes in front, you can just tap that button and it'll go into manual focus and that focus will hold, and then the other distractions don't pull the focus. But there's all kinds of things you could set that for, anything in the menu that you want to configure yourself. Now there's other things that we can do with this. So if you want to control the ISO, aperture, and shutter speed, we can do that through the cable. But there's another thing that we can do in the cable too, is we can change the focus on here. If we go into manual focus, we can actually focus through this cable. So what we want to do is just turn everything off and turn off the gimbal. And then what you want to do is take the USB-C cable. So we're going to go in the side here. You'll see the slot for the USB-C. I like to use the flat end on here. You could use either end. And then what we want to do is don't go under here because we don't want it to get kind of tangled. So I go above. So don't go into the bottom of the gimbal because you might think, oh, that's where you want to plug it in. That's where we charge it. Where we actually plug it in, you'll see on the front of the gimbal where it says RSS and it shows a camera. Just plug that in and make sure it's plugged all the way in. All right, great. Now, let's set up the functionality because it's going to require just a second. So we're going to turn the camera on. Let's turn on the power. All right. Now we're going to go back to the menu. Now, here's the thing. If you're using the cable on the Sony camera, there's a few settings. And one of them is really important is that Bluetooth function. You need to turn it off. If you have Bluetooth turned on, the cable is not going to work. The Sony camera will not talk to the cable while that's turned on. It's kind of like one of those little caveats. All right, let's see what else we need to set up. So let's go under menu. We're going to go up to transfer remote, and then we're going to go down to PC remote function. Turn that on and make sure PC remote is turned on, and the method is set to USB. If it doesn't let you because the smartphone option is on, just go up and turn the smartphone function off, but that should pretty much do it. And let's test it by test the record button first. That works, great. And now I can see, yep, this is working. So we can control different things. Okay, and if you want to do the focus, what you want to do is I've actually set my C3 button for focus. You need to go into manual focus. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to control the focus because it's going to stay in autofocus. And then what you want to do is under here, tap on the dial functions, go down, choose focus and zoom. And now if I turn this wheel, yep, the focus is manual focus now. Very nice. Now you can change other things. You could change the ISO, aperture, shutter speed, and other functions there. So the ones I find the most useful are either to set the manual focus so I can do rack focusing, different things like that, and also, you know, track with obstacles in between. And the aperture is the other one, because generally speaking, I keep the shutter speed pretty much set. So if I'm shooting 24 frames per second, it's 1/50th, 30 frames per second, 1/60th, 60 frames per second, 1/125th. And so I don't really mess with the shutter speed. And with the aperture, it's the other thing, to let more light in, you can open up the aperture or the iris, but be aware that's also going to change the depth of field. So if you don't want to do that, then use the ISO to kind of lighten and darken things. So there's some additional functionality we're going to look at on the gimbal and also on the phone. But before we do that, why don't we look at how to set this up in vertical mode? So what if you want to go from horizontal to vertical shooting mode? Let me show you. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to slide off the entire plate. So we're going to loosen it at the bottom, and then we're going to slide it to the side. You'll see a little button, push that, and then we're going to pull that off. So I've got a whole mounting mechanism right here. The next thing we're going to do is take this arm off. So we're just going to loosen off this arm, slide it down. You'll feel a little button kind of thing at the bottom. Pull that, pops off. Put that aside. All right, and all we need to do now is just take the camera off the plate and everything, take it in the top, slide it down. See this little red lever? Push that in. And now you're locked in position. Now, something to bear in mind, when you are in vertical mode, you do need to rebalance the camera. So you can't just kind of just flip it over and start using it. So let's do a quick rebalance right now. And now you're ready to shoot vertical. And you can go in underslung mode in vertical as well. Let me show you how to put it back. Let's turn it off. Lock everything. Let's loosen off the mechanism here to slide everything out. You'll feel a little button at the bottom. Just kind of pull that. All right, now you want to mount this back on. This part is a little bit tricky. Do is if you want to do the briefcase handle and other accessories, that has a standard NATO port, which is not a hot shoe, it's a cold shoe, but it will take the accessories from the RS3 Pro, and I'm sure you can probably get this briefcase handle separately if you wanted it. It'll just kind of slide up on here, lock into position, lock the handle in. And now you have two-handed capability if you want to work that way. Personally, I kind of like this. It makes it easy, especially when you go into the underslung mode and you want to kind of use it like briefcase mode like that. All right, let's talk about some of the functionality. I'll just take this off real quickly. The nice thing about it, once you've paired, it will automatically pair when you reopen the app. You've got settings and different things like that. We also have settings on the back, where you can control sensitivity and speed of movements and different things like that. But then if you want to do the creative stuff, we're going to go into Create. And in Create, you're going to see several things. So you're going to see a virtual joystick and a force mobile. This enables us to control this remotely. So if we hit the little controller on the back, the little joystick, we can move this around. But we can also do it manually if we hit virtual joystick I can do this with the app, with my mobile phone. So this is nice if I'm filming myself or something like that. Now, there's an easier way of doing this. It doesn't give you as much control, but it's definitely easy where we can mimic the movement of the phone. If we turn on Force Mobile, and by the way, for this to work, make sure you're using the cable, not just the Bluetooth. So as I move my phone, this will mimic the movements of my phone. So that's another way to kind of use this remotely. Let's turn that off and hit recenter. So then there's the ability to go in here and set a panorama where it will automatically just move the camera. Same thing with a time lapse. You can have it moving while it's doing a time lapse. We can do tracking where we can literally set up waypoints, and then we can set up the movement, record them. It will remember those movements and it will repeat them every single time we hit that button. Now we can also control how long you want it to stay in each position and how long you want it to go between positions. This is pretty self-explanatory inside the app. So we can change the shutter speed, aperture, ISO, and the focus speed all here inside the app. Once again, the cable needs to be connected in order to do that. If you're just using the Bluetooth, it won't work. And it even has the ability to set up a gaming controller, so I can use an Xbox or a PlayStation controller with this. Which could be kind of fun. I haven't tried that yet. I'll probably try it at some point. And then if we look in here, there's a couple of little things that we can do. If you want to recenter the camera at any time, double tap, and that will recenter. If you want to do selfie mode, triple tap, it'll turn around, face me, double tap to go back. All right, so there we go. That's the full setup of the DJI RS3 MINI. Let me know in the comments underneath if you found this useful. And by the way, if you're new to photoshopCAFE, hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and you won't miss any of my tutorials. And if you guys like this, do me a favor, hit that like button. Helps with the YouTube algorithm. And until next time, I'll see you at the cafe.